Thank you for staying with Benchmark. Now, LMD's October edition concludes that fears of a possible US recession could dampen confidence. However, it expects steady growth to continue in Sri Lanka. The journal notes that following the US ratings downgrade and nervousness on Europe's financial front, business and consumer confidence could well come under fire, but that Asia may be somewhat immune to all of this. Here's Anushan Selvaraja with more.
Welcome to the Voice of Business. Joining me on the show this week is economist with Standard Chartered Bank and LMD columnist Samantha Amarasinghe. Now, you seem very confident, Samantha, about the macro environment. Can you tell us why? You cite a strong domestic demand in the edition of LMD that comes out this week. But how about the prospect of much lower demand from the West? Should there be a downturn led by the US and parts of the Eurozone?
Yes, macro fundamentals at present remain strong. Q2 GDP, in fact, was released showing growth at 8.2% year on year, and inflation is moderating. And in the first half, we saw growth at 8%, and we're expecting this growth momentum to sustain in the second half. The manufacturing, construction, and tourism sectors remain buoyant, while the wholesale and retail trade, which contributed 20.5% to GDP in Q2, grew by about 11%, and this should also be a key driver of growth. We're confident that domestic demand should help Sri Lanka withstand the risks of weaker global growth. However, Asia faces increased risks from the ongoing problems in Europe and the slowdown in the US. So if the West were to be even weaker than we expect, falling into a double-dip recession, for instance, this would take its toll on Asian growth prospects. And so across Asia, we anticipate some decline in confidence and softening in export orders given the challenges facing the US and Euro area, and Sri Lanka is not immune to this.
Now, you are also alluding to a likely improvement in investor appetite in LMD and also expecting improved capital flows. Aren't you concerned that our foreign inflows thus far, for instance, have been far below target?
Well, we're a little concerned due to the global slowdown, which is likely to disrupt financial inflows to Sri Lanka. But although FDI inflows have been below the 2011 target to date, they're still well ahead of the 2010 FDI inflows and currently stand at $413 million US dollars, which is up by about 98% year on year over the same period. The improvement in the country's sovereign credit standing in July should bode very well for investor appetite going forward.
Lower commodity prices, as you say, will also, quote, reduce balance of payment pressures and significantly improve the inflation outlook, unquote. Can you tell us more, and also for how long you think inflation can be maintained in single digits?
Yes, imported inflation definitely becomes less of a concern when global commodity prices fall. So as long as domestic supply side dynamics are strong, as they are at present, this serves to improve the overall inflation outlook. And in fact, our inflation forecast sees inflation in single digits for quite some time, at least until the end of 2013.
How about the apparel industry, Samantha? In the context of a possible recession in the West, the US accounts for almost 40% of our apparel exports. So wouldn't it be seriously affected? And if so, will we as a nation suddenly face a forex reserves crisis?
Undoubtedly, a slowdown in the US would affect Sri Lanka's exports, and we would see weaker export demand from the US, not so much in the second half of this year as orders are pre-booked, but more so in the first half of 2012, and it's something which is likely to weigh on our trade deficit. But I would not go so far as saying garment exports will be seriously affected. And in fact, I'd like to highlight that garment exports still increased by 5% and recorded the highest monthly value in July this year, which was 385 million US dollars, despite the lingering recession concerns. On your point about FX reserves, an FX reserves crisis as a result of this is highly unlikely. Even though the garment sector is one of Sri Lanka's primary sources of FX earnings, contributing approximately 8% to our GDP. We're sitting on a very healthy US dollars 8.1 billion of FX reserves currently.
As for tourism, what is at stake? As you say, should the bleak outlook for the Eurozone persist, our source markets could be severely undermined. How serious is this scenario from a growth and forex point of view?
Well, inflows into the services account have been largely driven by higher tourism earnings, which have been growing at a healthy rate of around 50% year on year for the first 7 months. So from a balance of payments outlook, it does have serious implications. Offsetting the trade deficit on the current account would definitely not be helped by these lower inflows. And I'd just like to highlight that the tourism sector's direct contribution to GDP is only a modest 2%. However, it is an emerging growth driver in terms of job creation, creating over 52,000 direct employment opportunities in 2010. So this is where it is likely to have the strongest impact.
That was Samantha Amarasinghe speaking to Benchmark's Anushan Selvaraja. We hope you enjoyed our show today. We'll see you again next week.